Hey everybody, and welcome back to Investing with Wesley. I have a lot of different strategies that I use when I'm investing, whether it's for myself or for other clients. But no matter how many different strategies I use, one of them is always used, and that is game theory. And in today's episode, I want to talk to you all about it and how I use it. Let's get into it. Okay, so for starters, what is game theory? Now, game theory in and of itself is a giant topic, and I highly recommend you watch some videos here on YouTube about it. But for the premise of this video, all you really need to know is that game theory is the idea of always creating a winning strategy based on the knowledge that you and all the other players of the game have to always come out ahead. In a sense, think of game theory like a game of chess. Everyone's decisions affect the decisions of everybody else. If I move a chess piece forward, then that decision I just made will play an effect on my opponent's decision to move certain pieces around. So that is a real watered down version of what game theory is. Now, in game theory, there's two different kinds of games. There's finite games and then there's infinite games. Finite games are the most common kind of game that everyone knows about. Finite games have known players, set rules, and an agreed upon objective. Think of baseball, football, Scrabble, Uno, poker, blackjack. All of these are finite games because we know who we're playing, we know the rules, and we know the objective. Now, in an infinite game, there's known and unknown players. The rules are easily changed, and the objective is to keep the game going, whereas in a finite game, the objective is to win. Now, when you put finite players against finite players, the system is stable. Think of any sports game. Same thing with infinite players versus infinite players. Think of the Cold War. There was really no objective to win just as much as it was not to lose. But the system becomes unstable when you mix a finite and an infinite player together. Now, like I said, infinite games have no winners, only losers. And you lose an infinite game when you run out of the willpower or the resources to keep playing the game. Okay, now that we've scratched the surface of game theory and you know just enough to continue, let's merge it over into the business and investing world so I can tell you exactly how I use it in my strategies when it comes to investing. Now, it's safe to say that the game of business has been around longer than any business currently around has existed. The premise of solving a problem or creating an item and selling it to make money, the premise of that, the game of business, has been around since the start of time. Now, business is an infinite game. There is no winning the game of business because the rules are always changing and not agreed upon. And since there's no rules, there's no end. And since there's no end to the game of business, there's no winning the game of business. And this premise right here, the difference between finite games and infinite games, is one thing I always keep in mind whenever I'm selecting a business that I want to invest in. I do not want to invest in a company that's playing a finite game. I know the objective in their head is to win, but there is no such thing as winning at business. Companies that are playing a finite game will often say things like, we want to beat the competition, we want to beat out our numbers from previous quarter into next quarter, and those types of statements. It's the leaders and workers of a company that create their strategies and make their decisions based on the infinite game that will truly be successful in outlasting and frustrating the competition into dropping out. Part of this strategy is finding companies that know what game they're playing, that know that they're playing the infinite game and are working towards making their business successful and lastful, not just beating out the competition. And honestly, I completely understand the business model of thinking in a finite game. And it's an important part of marketing as well, showing that your product or that your idea is better than the competition's. So the consumer should choose your product. But the problem is when you get into the mindset of thinking that that's all there is to it, is always beating the competition, always beating the numbers on your last quarter, and that sort of mindset that a lot of businesses fall under. That is when they start playing the finite game and will inevitably lose. Because what happens when your product or your ideas no longer beat the competition? You're going to mentally take loss after loss after loss, and your revenue is going to suffer for it. And then when your revenue suffers, you're forced to lay off more workers, so there's less enthusiasm at work to really spark new ideas and to create that drive that will help these businesses succeed. So you see, when you get in the mindset of playing a finite game and you start losing that game, it's almost a perpetual system, in which case the losses only get larger until you eventually lose the game of business. What most companies don't understand is they need to have an infinite game concept. Think of companies like Costco or even Apple. Apple does not really care what their competitors like Samsung or Microsoft are doing with phones or computers. They don't care. Their whole goal is to be creative and show ingenuity to make their products and their ideas come to life. That is another reason why Elon Musk is so successful in all his ideas. He went from creating cars to space ventures to even making random flamethrowers. He is really good at making his ideas come to life just out of pure creativity. And the same thing goes for Costco, the wholesale grocery store. The founder of Costco says that they're not looking to beat next quarter. They're looking to be successful in the next 50 years. So you could tell just based on how they do their press conferences and the knowledge that they have, which companies are playing infinite games, only looking to benefit themselves and to help their own company grow, regardless of whatever the competition is doing. Those are the companies that you want to invest in, because those are the companies that will disrupt the industry and force all the other players to inevitably merge with them or quit. Before we close out, I want to give some big red flags that you should look out for to help you determine whether a company is thinking like a finite game or an infinite game. Probably the biggest red flag is when a company or a CEO does a press release that says what their goals are, and they don't ever actually say what their goals are. As an example, if a CEO says that his or her primary goal is to create as much value for the shareholders as possible, that's a big red flag. Now, that's a good thing, and you could probably profit for a while, but exactly how do they plan on creating as much value for the shareholders as possible? It's companies that answer questions without actually giving details to the answer that are playing a finite game. Another big red flag that a business is playing a finite game is when they constantly announce that they're number one. Because we already established in an infinite game, there are no winners, there are no number ones. There is only the perpetuation of the same game. In an infinite game, the whole point is not to win, but to keep your game of business going. So when a company, whether it's real estate, sales, retail, insurance, it doesn't really matter. Whenever a company consistently says, we're number one, we're the best, blah, 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 it is almost a sure thing that they're playing a finite game because no one agreed upon those set of rules. Think of realtors as an example. Both realtors will tell you they're number one, but it's only when you learn by what metrics they're measuring that really determines if you believe they're number one or not. Realtor A says that they're number one because the total value of homes sold under them has been the largest amount in the area. However, Realtor B has sold the most homes in the area. It's only when you learn that Realtor A has only sold 2 homes that were multi-million-dollar homes, whereas Realtor B has sold 100 homes that were all middle income or mid-level homes, that you really determine, well, yes, technically both of you are number one, but it's also impossible to be number one without previously agreeing upon the rules. And if you ever agree upon the rules, you're now entering a finite game. And as we already established, there is no finite game to business. Only the perpetuation of the success of your business. I hope you got value from this video. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe because it really helps this YouTube channel get out there. I have a dedicated Facebook and Instagram account, so if you ever had a question, comment, or wanted something addressed, or even wanted to recommend a topic for a later video, feel free to message me there because the YouTube comment section is full of scammers and it just gets really confusing replying to everyone constantly. Either way though, the choice is yours, and I'll see you in the next episode.